A billionaire's daughter living as a poor college student knocks on a struggling single father's door during a thunderstorm. He takes her in, not knowing her secret wealth. She finds the unconditional love she never had, while he finds hope. But when his daughter falls critically ill, everything changes forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The rain poured down like tears from heaven that cold November evening, drumming against the windows of the old apartment building on Maple Street. David Martinez sat at his small kitchen table, staring at the stack of unpaid bills that seemed to grow taller each passing day. His weathered hands, calloused from years of construction work, trembled slightly as he counted the few crumpled dollars left in his worn leather wallet. $43.27. That was all that remained until his next paycheck from the construction site, still 5 long days away. The electricity bill glared at him from the top of the pile, $187 past due, with a bright red final notice stamped across it like a warning. Below that lay the rent notice from Mrs. Patterson, their patient but increasingly frustrated landlord. Then there was Emma's school lunch account, nearly empty, and the overdue notice from the pharmacy for her asthma medication that she desperately needed. David rubbed his tired, bloodshot eyes and ran his fingers through his graying hair. At 35 years old, he felt much older than his age, worn down by 3 years of struggling alone after his wife's death. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy burden he could never set aside. "Dad, are you okay?" came a gentle, concerned voice from behind him. David quickly shuffled the bills under yesterday's newspaper and turned to face his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. She stood in the doorway of their tiny kitchen, wearing her favorite pink pajamas decorated with little unicorns dancing across the fabric. Her big brown eyes, so much like her mother's, held concern and wisdom far too mature for someone so young. Her dark hair was messy from sleep, and she clutched her beloved stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hopscotch, tightly against her small chest. "Everything's fine, Princess," he said, forcing his most convincing smile and hoping she couldn't see through his carefully constructed facade. "Just checking some papers for work tomorrow." Emma padded across the cold linoleum floor in her bunny slippers, the soft sound barely audible in the quiet apartment. She climbed onto his lap with the trusting ease of childhood, settling against his chest like she had done every night since she was tiny. The familiar weight of her small body brought him comfort, as it always did. "You look sad, Daddy," she observed with the startling directness that children possess. "Your eyes get all crinkly when you're worried about grown-up things." David's heart clenched painfully. Since her mother Sarah had died 3 years ago after a long, devastating battle with cancer, Emma had become unusually perceptive about his struggles and emotions, reading his moods like pages in a book he couldn't keep closed. The crushing medical bills from Sarah's treatment had drained their savings account, maxed out their credit cards, and eventually forced them to sell their modest but comfortable house. Despite working double shifts and picking up weekend jobs whenever possible, David could barely manage to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. "I'm never sad when I'm with you, sweetheart," he said truthfully, kissing the top of her head and breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You make everything in the world seem better, just like your mommy used to say." Emma looked up at him with those impossibly wise brown eyes. "Mommy used to say that I was like sunshine on cloudy days. Do you remember that story she told me about the butterfly garden?" "Of course I do," David replied, his voice soft with memory. "Should I tell it to you again?" "Yes, please. It always helps me sleep better." So David began the familiar tale, one he had shared with Emma hundreds of times since her mother's death. He told her about how Sarah had planted a magical garden full of colorful flowers that attracted the most beautiful butterflies anyone had ever seen. How she used to say that butterflies were really angels in disguise, visiting Earth to remind people that the most beautiful things in life often came from the most difficult changes, just like how butterflies emerged from their dark cocoons transformed and ready to fly. As he spoke in gentle, soothing tones, Emma's breathing grew deep and even, her small body relaxing completely against him. By the time he finished the story, she was fast asleep in his arms, her face peaceful and innocent. David carefully carried her to their shared bedroom, they couldn't afford the 2-bedroom apartment anymore, and tucked her into her small bed, pulling the colorful quilt her grandmother had sewn up to her chin. Standing there in the darkness, watching his daughter sleep, David made the same solemn promise he whispered every single night. Somehow, someway he would find a way to give her the life she deserved. A sharp, urgent knock at the front door interrupted his thoughts and prayers. David frowned deeply, glancing at the old clock hanging on the kitchen wall. 9:15 in the evening. Who could possibly be visiting at this late hour? especially during such a terrible storm. He opened the door cautiously to find a young woman standing in the dimly lit hallway, completely drenched from the torrential rain outside. She appeared to be in her early 20s with long dark hair plastered to her face and neck, and clothes that clung to her slight frame, dripping steady streams of water onto the faded carpet beneath her feet. A small, worn backpack hung from her thin shoulders, and she was shivering so violently that her teeth were chattering audibly. Her jeans and sweater looked expensive despite being soaked, and her sneakers made soft squelching sounds with every slight movement. "Excuse me, sir," she said through chattering teeth, her voice barely above a whisper and filled with exhaustion. "I'm so terribly sorry to bother you this late at night. I'm looking for Mrs. Chen's apartment, but I think I might have the wrong building entirely. My phone died hours ago, and I've been walking around in this storm trying to find the right address." David's heart immediately went out to the bedraggled young woman before him. She looked utterly exhausted, scared, and completely defeated by whatever circumstances had brought her to his door on such a miserable night. "I'm afraid Mrs. Chen moved out about 6 weeks ago," he said gently. "Her daughter in California needed help with her grandchildren. Are you all right? You look like you're freezing to death out there." The girl nodded quickly, but David could see that she was anything but all right. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint from the cold, and she was shaking so hard she could barely speak coherently. "I'll be fine, really. I just need to find a phone somewhere so I can call someone. Anyone." "Wait just a minute," David said firmly as she turned to leave, her shoulders slumped in complete defeat. He couldn't possibly let this young woman go back out into the dangerous storm. In weather like this, hypothermia was a very real and potentially deadly threat. "You absolutely cannot walk around in this condition. Please come inside at least until this storm passes over." The girl hesitated for several long moments, looking up and down the empty hallway as if weighing her very limited options. "I really don't want to impose on you and your family. You don't even know me and it's so late." "I'm David Martinez," he said warmly, stepping aside to make room for her in the doorway. "And my daughter Emma is sleeping in the next room, though I have a feeling she'll want to meet you in the morning." "I'm Sarah," the girl said quietly, then suddenly caught herself, her eyes widening slightly as if she had made some kind of mistake. "I mean Sam. Sam Wilson. My name is Sam Wilson." David noticed the slip immediately but chose not to comment on it. Everyone had their reasons for wanting to be someone different, especially when life had dealt them difficult cards to play. He disappeared into the bathroom and returned with the thickest, fluffiest towel he could find. "Here, please dry yourself off before you catch pneumonia. Are you hungry? You look like you haven't eaten in quite a while." As if summoned by his words, Sam's stomach responded with a long, loud growl that echoed through the small apartment. She pressed her hand to her abdomen, her cheeks flushing bright red with embarrassment. "I'm sorry about that. I haven't had anything to eat since yesterday morning, but I really don't want to be any more trouble than I already am. Dad makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the whole wide world," came Emma's sleepy voice from the bedroom doorway. She had apparently awakened and was now peeking around the corner, her hair sticking up at odd angles and her eyes bright with curiosity about their unexpected visitor. "And he puts butter on the outside so they get all golden and crispy." David smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, though he was acutely aware that they only had enough bread and cheese left for 2 sandwiches, what was supposed to be their simple dinner for tomorrow night. Without any hesitation whatsoever, he began pulling the precious ingredients from their nearly empty refrigerator, determined to make their guest feel welcome despite their own limitations. "You really don't have to feed me," Sam protested weakly, but David could hear the desperate hunger in her voice, and it broke his heart to think of anyone going without food. "When was the last time you had a proper hot meal?" David asked gently, firing up their old electric griddle and beginning to butter slices of bread with careful precision. Sam's eyes filled with tears that she tried desperately to hide. "I lost my job at the coffee shop about 2 weeks ago. The manager said I was too slow during the morning rush hour, but I think he really just needed an excuse to hire his nephew who had been asking for work. I've been staying in my friend Jenny's dorm room at the university, but her roommate complained to the resident advisor about unauthorized guests staying too long, so I had to pack up and leave this afternoon. Mrs. Chen was supposed to rent me a tiny room above her nephew's restaurant for a price I could actually afford, but when I finally found the place. But she had already moved away," David finished gently, understanding flooding through him like a wave. "What about your family? Surely there must be someone who could help you during this difficult time?" Sam's face grew dark and closed off, a shadow passing over her features like clouds blocking the sun. "I don't have any family. Not anymore. Not anyone who would care what happens to me. David recognized that particular brand of devastating pain immediately, the hollow, aching sensation of being completely alone in an indifferent world. He had felt it himself when Sarah died, leaving him to navigate the treacherous waters of single parenthood and overwhelming grief all by himself. "Well, you have somewhere safe and warm to stay tonight," he said decisively. "The couch isn't much to look at and it's probably not as comfortable as you're used to, but it's dry and warm and it's yours for as long as you need it." "I absolutely cannot accept such generosity," Sam said, shaking her head firmly and backing toward the door. "You don't even know me. I could be dangerous or a thief or some kind of criminal running from the law." "Are you?" David asked calmly, never pausing in his sandwich preparation as he carefully placed cheese between buttered bread slices. "What? Are you dangerous or a thief or running from the law?" "No, of course not," Sam exclaimed. "But that's not the point." "Actually, that's exactly the point," David said simply, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "I know enough about you right now. I know that you're a person who desperately needs help, and sometimes in this world, that's all we really need to know about someone before we decide to lend a helping hand." Emma had fully emerged from the bedroom now, dragging her beloved Mr. Hopscotch behind her across the floor. She studied their soaking wet guest with the intense, unfiltered curiosity that only children possess. "Are you really, really sad?" she asked Sam with startling directness. "Emma," David started to gently scold his daughter for being too personal, but Sam held up a hand to stop him. "It's perfectly fine," she said softly, kneeling down so she was at Emma's eye level. "Yes, sweetheart, I am quite sad right now. Sometimes grown-ups have very sad days just like children do, and today has been one of those days for me." "My daddy has lots and lots of sad days too," Emma said with the matter-of-fact honesty that children possessed. "But he tries really hard to hide them from me so I won't worry about him. Do you want to see some of my drawings? They always make my daddy feel at least a little bit better when he's sad." Before Sam could answer, Emma had already run off to her room to retrieve her art supplies and latest masterpieces. David felt warmth creep up his neck as he realized just how perceptive his 8-year-old daughter really was. "She's absolutely amazing," Sam said quietly, watching Emma rummage through a shoebox full of crayons, markers, and construction paper. "You've raised an incredible little girl." "She's my entire world," David admitted without reservation, carefully flipping the golden brown sandwiches on the hot griddle. "After her mother died 3 years ago, Emma became my reason to keep going, my motivation to get up every morning and face whatever challenges the day might bring." They ate their simple but delicious dinner together around the small kitchen table, Emma chattering excitedly about her school, her favorite teacher Miss Rodriguez, and her best friend Katie who had a pet hamster named Pickles who could do tricks. Sam listened intently to every word, asking thoughtful follow-up questions and laughing genuinely at Emma's funny stories in a way that seemed completely natural and unforced. David found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks, watching his daughter's face light up as she had an enthusiastic audience for her tales. After Emma had finally been convinced to return to bed, but only after extracting solemn promises that Sam would definitely still be there when she woke up in the morning, the two adults sat together in the small living room. Sam had gratefully borrowed one of David's old sweaters, which hung loosely on her petite frame, and was slowly sipping a steaming cup of instant coffee that David had prepared. "Why are you being so incredibly kind to me?" she asked softly, staring down into the dark liquid in her cup as if it might contain answers to life's mysteries. Most people in this city would have called the police or simply ignored someone knocking on their door this late at night, especially during such a terrible storm. David was quiet for several long moments, carefully gathering his thoughts and memories. "About 3 years ago, my wife Sarah was in the hospital fighting for her life. She had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer, and the treatments were both brutal and incredibly expensive. We had some basic insurance through my job, but it wasn't nearly enough to cover the costs of chemotherapy, radiation, experimental drugs, and extended hospital stays." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion as he was transported back to those dark, desperate days. "I was working 3 different jobs at the time, construction during the day, stocking shelves at a grocery store at night, and cleaning office buildings on the weekends, just trying to earn enough money to pay for her medical care and keep us from losing everything we had worked so hard to build." Sam listened with complete attention, her coffee growing cold in her hands as she focused entirely on his words. "One particularly difficult day, after Sarah had endured an especially harsh round of chemotherapy that left her violently ill, I found myself sitting alone in the hospital cafeteria. The doctors had been talking about new experimental treatments that our insurance company refused to cover, treatments that might give her a real chance at survival. I was sitting there with nothing but a handful of loose change, suddenly realizing that I didn't even have enough money to buy myself a simple sandwich. I hadn't eaten anything in almost 2 full days because every single dollar had to go toward Sarah's care. David's voice grew softer, filled with gratitude even after all these years. There was this elderly janitor named Miguel who was cleaning tables nearby. He must have noticed me sitting there counting pennies over and over again. Without saying a single word, he walked over to the cafeteria counter and bought me a turkey sandwich, a bag of potato chips, and a large cup of real coffee, not the terrible free stuff from the waiting room machine. When I tried to thank him and explain that I would definitely pay him back as soon as I possibly could, he just smiled this incredibly warm smile and said, "Pass it forward when you can, Mijo. That's how we keep hope alive in this world." Then he just walked away before I could say another word. David wiped away tears he hadn't realized were falling. Sarah died 2 months later, despite all our efforts and all the money we spent trying to save her. All those jobs, all that struggle and sacrifice, and I still couldn't save the woman I loved more than life itself. But Miguel's simple act of kindness reminded me that even in the darkest, most hopeless times, there are still genuinely good people in this world. People who help others simply because it's the right thing to do, not because they expect anything in return. Sam was quietly wiping away her own tears, deeply moved by his story. "I'm so very sorry about your wife. That must have been incredibly difficult to endure." "Her name was Sarah too," David said with a sad but genuine smile. "Maybe that's part of why I felt so strongly that I should help you tonight. Maybe it's her way of reminding me to keep passing Miguel's kindness forward." "Or Sam," she corrected very quietly, almost under her breath. "Of course, Sam." David studied her face carefully, noting the way she seemed to retreat into herself whenever certain topics arose. "That really is your name now, isn't it?" Sam looked away, staring out the rain-streaked window. "It is now. It's who I've chosen to become." David nodded with understanding, recognizing that some stories weren't ready to be shared, some wounds too fresh to expose to the light. "Well, Sam, you're welcome to stay here for as long as you need to figure out your next steps. We may not have much, but what we have, we're happy to share." The next morning, David awoke to the most incredible, mouth-watering aroma wafting through their small apartment. He padded out to the kitchen in his pajamas to discover Sam and Emma working together like a well-coordinated team, both of them giggling and laughing as they expertly flipped what appeared to be perfectly golden pancakes on their old griddle. "Daddy, look what Sam taught me," Emma announced with pure delight. "She knows how to make pancakes that look exactly like smiley faces. And she showed me how to make the bacon extra crispy, just the way you like it." David stared in amazement at the elaborate breakfast feast covering their small table. There were indeed perfect smiley face pancakes arranged on a platter, along with scrambled eggs that looked fluffy and perfect, strips of crispy bacon, fresh fruit that definitely hadn't been in their refrigerator the night before, and what appeared to be freshly squeezed orange juice in a glass pitcher. "Where on earth did all this wonderful food come from?" he asked, completely bewildered by the abundance before him. Sam looked slightly embarrassed, avoiding his direct gaze. "I got up very early this morning and went to that little grocery store on the corner. I had a bit of money saved up from my last job, and I really wanted to contribute something meaningful after your incredible kindness last night." "You absolutely shouldn't have spent your precious money on us," David protested, though his mouth was watering and his stomach was growling at the sight and smell of the feast. They usually had nothing but generic cereal for breakfast, and only when they actually had cereal in the apartment. "It's really nothing at all," Sam said quickly, waving away his concerns. "Besides, Emma was an amazing helper with everything. She's an absolutely excellent sous chef in the kitchen. I cracked 4 whole eggs all by myself," Emma announced proudly, puffing out her small chest. "And I only got tiny little pieces of shell in the bowl, and Sam showed me how to fish them out with a bigger piece of shell." As they settled around the table to enjoy their unexpected feast, David marveled at how natural and right this felt, the three of them sharing a meal, Emma chattering happily about her dreams and plans for the day, Sam listening with genuine interest and asking thoughtful follow-up questions that made Emma feel heard and important. It had been such a long time since their small apartment had felt truly warm and filled with joy. "So tell me about yourself, Sam," David said gently between bites of the most delicious pancakes he had tasted in years. "You mentioned that you're a college student?" Sam hesitated for just a moment, then said carefully, "I was studying business administration at Stanford University. Or at least I was until recently. I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to afford to continue next semester, given my current financial situation." David nearly choked on his orange juice. Stanford University was not only one of the most expensive institutions in the entire country, but also one of the most prestigious and academically challenging. That's an absolutely incredible school, Sam. You must be extraordinarily intelligent to have gotten accepted there. I was fortunate enough to receive a partial scholarship, Sam explained quickly, her cheeks flushing slightly. It's based on both academic merit and demonstrated financial need, and it covers about 60% of the total expenses. But even with that help, the remaining costs for tuition, room and board, textbooks, and basic living expenses add up frighteningly fast. What specifically were you studying? David asked, genuinely curious about this mysterious young woman who had appeared on his doorstep. Business administration with a concentrated focus on nonprofit management, Sam said, and for the first time since arriving, her eyes truly lit up with passion and enthusiasm. My dream is to work with organizations that genuinely help people who need it most, maybe educational initiatives for underprivileged children, or comprehensive programs that provide job training and life skills for people who have been unemployed for extended periods. Emma looked up from her pancakes with curiosity. What's nonprofit mean exactly? It means helping people without trying to make money from that help, Sam explained patiently, her voice warm and educational. Like when your daddy helped me last night during the storm. He didn't ask for anything back or expect me to pay him. He just wanted to make sure I was safe and had somewhere warm to stay. Oh, I understand now. Emma exclaimed with sudden comprehension. Like when Daddy and I made all those sandwiches for the homeless shelter last Christmas, and we didn't want any money for doing it. David felt a surge of pride in his daughter's natural compassion and understanding, even as he remembered how they had to choose between making that charitable donation and buying Emma any Christmas presents that year. They had made the sandwiches together, and Emma had been absolutely thrilled to help people who needed food and kindness. Exactly like that, Sam confirmed with a warm, genuine smile. Your daddy taught you something very important about helping others. David made a life-changing decision in that moment. Listen, Sam, I have a proposition for you to consider. You're welcome to stay here for as long as you need while you figure out your next steps. The couch actually converts into a reasonably comfortable bed, and there's plenty of room for your belongings. In exchange for staying here, maybe you could help me out by being here when Emma gets home from school. I usually don't make it back from the construction site until around 6 o'clock, and she's been staying with our elderly neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, but I always feel terrible about imposing on her kindness. I absolutely cannot let you make such a generous offer, Sam protested immediately. This is your home, your private space, your sanctuary. Our space, David corrected her gently but firmly. And you would actually be helping me out tremendously. Emma gets home from school at 3:30 every afternoon, and having someone here that she trusts and enjoys spending time with would be an enormous relief for me as a working parent. Emma clapped her small hands together with pure excitement. Oh, please stay with us, Sam. Please. We could do homework together every day and you could teach me more things about cooking, and maybe we could read lots and lots of books together, and you could help me practice my piano. Looking down into the little girl's hopeful, pleading eyes, Sam felt something she hadn't experienced in many years, the genuine warmth of belonging somewhere, of being truly wanted for who she was rather than what she could provide. Here was a child who wanted her company not because of any material benefits, but simply because she enjoyed having Sam around. Okay, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion she was trying to control. If you're absolutely certain I won't be in the way or cause any problems. You could never be in the way, David said with complete sincerity. Welcome to our little family, Sam.